So, hello and welcome back to Mr. Charles Dickens' novel, A Tale of Two Cities, where I feel like we finally got a little more meat to our story. Honestly, I'm probably in the wrong here. The story is most likely supposed to be all the political stuff, but me being me, I like seeing the people stuff a lot more than the political stuff. So yeah, we learned of the existence of a possible love try or maybe even quadrangle being set up between Charles Darnay, who definitely seems to have Dr. Manette's blessing, and potentially Sidney Carton and maybe even Mr. Stryker the lawyer. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see as to all of that. And a little bit more about, honestly, I was thinking about this when I was out walking today. It feels like courtship back in the olden days was very much not involving the woman at all. Like Charles admitted that he hadn't even spoken to Miss Manette yet and let her know that he was even interested before going to her father. And that, looking at it from 2025 eyes, feels kind of icky to me. I realize it is sort of the way things were back then and possibly even the way things still are in different areas of the world, but it feels kind of icky to me. Let me know what you guys think. To me, it just felt kind of icky, but I know that that is more of a realistic look at times back then, but still. Anyway, enough of my rambling. It was a beautiful day today, so I am quite late in getting around to recording this because, according to the weathermen, although we're supposed to be clear tomorrow, it's also supposed to go back to being cold, which I object deeply to because I think it was almost 60 degrees today and it felt amazing. So I got out and did a lot of outside things. So that made me very happy. And now it's late and it's time to sit down and read. So that is what we're going to do. In book two, the golden thread of A Tale of Two Cities, with chapter 11, A Companion Picture. Sidney, said Mr. Stryver, on that very same night or morning to his jackal, mix another bowl of punch. I have something to say to you. Sidney had been working double ties that night, and the night before, and the night before that, and a good many nights in succession, making a grand clearance among Mr. Stryver's papers before the setting in of the long vacation. The clearance was effected at last. The Stryver arrears were handsomely fetched up, and everything was got rid of until November should come with its fogs atmospheric and fogs legal, and bring grist back to the mill again. Sidney was none the livelier, and none the soberer for this much application. It had taken a great deal of extra wet toweling to pull him through the night. A correspondingly extra quantity of wine had preceded the toweling, and he was in quite the damaged condition as he now pulled his turban off and threw it into the basin which he had steeped it in at intervals for the last 6 hours. "Are you mixing that other bowl of punch?" said Stryver, with his hands in his waistband, glancing around from the sofa where he was lying on his back. "I am." "Now look here. I'm going to tell you something that will rather surprise you, and perhaps will make you think me not quite as shrewd as you usually think me. I intend to marry." "Do you?" "Yes. And not for money. What do you say now?" "I don't feel disposed to say much. Who is she?" "Guess." "Do I know her?" "Guess." I'm not going to guess at 5 o'clock in the morning with my brains frying and sputtering in my head. If you want me to guess, you have to ask me to dinner. Well, fine, then I'll tell you, said Stryver, coming slowly into a sitting posture. Sidney, I rather despair of making myself intelligible to you because you're such an insensible dog. And you, said Sidney, busily concocting the punch, are such a sensitive and poetical spirit. Oh, come, said Stryver, laughing, though I don't prefer any claim to being the soul of romance, for I know better. Still, I am tenderer than you are. You're luckier if you mean that. I don't mean that. I mean, I am a man of more. You should say that you're gallant while you're on about it, said Sidney Carton. Fine. I'll say gallantry. My meaning is that I am a man. Stryver inflated himself at his friend as he made the punch. Who cares more to be agreeable? Who takes more pains to be agreeable, and who better knows how to be agreeable in a woman's society than you do? Go on, said Sidney. No, but before I go on, said Stryver, shaking his head in his bullying way, I'll have this out with you. You have been at Dr. Manette's house as much as I have, or more. Why, I have been ashamed of your moroseness there. Your manners have been that of silent and sullen and hangdog. Upon my life and soul, I have been ashamed of you, Sidney. It should be very beneficial to a man in your practice at the bar to be ashamed of anything, said Sidney. You ought to be much obliged to me. You shall not get off that easily, said Stryver, shouldering the rejoinder. No, Sidney, it is my duty to tell you, and I tell you to your face to do you good, that you are a devilishly ill-conditioned fellow in that sort of society. You are a disagreeable fellow. Sidney drank a bumper of the punch he had made and laughed. Look at me, said Stryver. I have less need to make myself agreeable than you do, being more independent of circumstance, so why do I do it? Haven't seen you do it yet, said Carton. I do it because it's politic. I do it on principle, and look at me, I get on. You don't get on with your account of your matrimonial intentions, said Carton. I wish you would keep to that. As to me, will you never understand that I'm incorrigible? He said that with the appearance of scorn. You have no business to be incorrigible, was his friend's answer, delivering it in a not very soothing tone. I have no business to be at all that I know of. So who's the lady? Now, don't let my announcement of the name make you uncomfortable, Sidney, said Mr. Stryver, preparing him with ostentatious friendliness for the disclosure he was about to make. Because I know that you don't mean half of what you say, and if you mean it at all, it would be of no importance. I make this preface because you once mentioned the lady to me in slighting terms. I did. Certainly, and in these chambers as well. Sidney Carton looked at his punch, and looked at his complacent friend, drank his punch, and looked again at his complacent friend. You made mention of the young lady as a golden-haired doll. The young lady is Miss Manette. If you had been a fellow of any sensitivity or delicacy or feeling in any kind of way, Sydney. I might have been a little resentful of your employing such a designation, but you are not. You want that sense altogether. Therefore, I am no more annoyed when I think of the expression than I should be annoyed by some man's opinion of a picture of mine, some man who had no eye for pictures, or a piece of music I made from someone who had no ear for music. Sidney Carton was drinking the punch at a great rate. He was drinking it by bumpers, staring at his friend. "Now you know all about it, Sid," said Mr. Stryver. "I don't care about fortune. She is a charming creature, and I have made my mind to please myself. On the whole, I think I can afford to please myself. She will have, in me, a man already pretty well off, and a rapidly rising man, and a man of some distinction. It's a piece of good fortune for her, and she is worthy of good fortune. Are you astonished?" Carton, still drinking punch, said, "Why should I be astonished?" "So you approve?" Carton, still drinking the punch, said, "Why should I not approve?" "Well," said Stryver, "you take to it more easily than I thought you would, and are less mercenary on my behalf than I thought you would. Though, to be sure, you know well enough by this time that your old chum is a man of very strong will. Yes, Sydney, I have had enough of this style of life, with no other as a change from it. I feel that it is a pleasant thing for a man to have a home where he feels inclined to go to it, and when he doesn't, he can just stay away. And I feel Miss Manette will tell well in any station and always do me credit. So I've made up my mind. And now, Sydney, old boy, I want to say a word to you about your prospects. You're in a bad way, you know. You really are in a bad way. You don't know the value of money. You live hard. You'll knock up one of these days and be old and sick. You really ought to think about a nurse." The prosperous patronage with which he said it made him look twice as big as he was, and 4 times as offensive. "Now let me recommend you," said Stryver, "to look it in the face. I have looked it in the face, in my different way. Look it in the face, in your different way. You should marry. Provide somebody to take care of you. Never mind your having no enjoyment of a woman's society, or understanding of it, or tact for it. Find somebody. Find some respectable woman with a little property. Somebody in the landlady way, or the lodging-letting way, and marry her against a rainy day. That is the thing for you. Now think on it, Sydney." "Yeah, I'll think about it," said Sydney. And that was the end of chapter 11. We're going to read another chapter because they were both pretty short. And I said, why not? So let me grab a drink and I'll be right back and we will read chapter 12. But before we go on to chapter 12, my thoughts on chapter 11 is, oh my gosh, Mr. Stryver may have gotten Charles Darnay off in the courtroom, but wow, is he just a piece of work. We'll go with that. Just decides, I'm going to marry. I've decided who I'm going to marry. I don't care if she wants me. And by the way, Sydney, you should find, some landlady, somebody with a bit of property to take care of you when you get old. Wow. I hope that she doesn't pick Mr. Stryver, that's for sure. Anyway, on to chapter 12 in A Tale of Two Cities, which is titled The Fellow of Delicacy. Mr. Stryver, having made up his mind to that magnanimous bestowal of good fortune upon the doctor's daughter, resolved to make her happiness known to her before he left town for his long vacation. After some mental debating of the point, he came to the conclusion that it would be as well to get all the preliminaries done with, and they could then arrange at their leisure whether he should give her his hand a week or two before Michaelmas, or maybe in the little Christmas vacation between that and Hilary. As to the strength of his case, he had no doubt about it, but he clearly saw his way to the verdict. Argued with the jury on substantial worldly grounds, which are the only grounds ever worth taking into account, it was a plain case with not a weak spot in it. He called himself for the plaintiff. There was no getting over his evidence. The counsel for the defendant threw up his brief, and the jury did not even turn to consider. After trying it in his own mind, Stryver was satisfied that no plainer case could be had. Accordingly, Mr. Stryver initiated the long vacation with a formal proposal to take Miss Manette to the Vauxhall Gardens, and that failing, take her to Raleigh. And that failing as well, it behooved him to present himself in Soho, and there declare his noble mind. Towards Soho, therefore, Mr. Stryver shouldered his way from the Temple while the bloom of the long vacation's infancy was still upon it. Anyone who had seen him projecting himself into Soho while he was yet on St. Dunstan's side of Temple Bar, bursting in his full-blown way along the pavement to the jostlement of weaker people, could definitely see how safe and strong he was. With his way taking him past Tellson's, he did both banking at Tellson's and, knowing Mr. Lorry as the intimate friend of the Manettes, it entered Stryver's mind to go into the bank and to reveal to Mr. Lorry the brightness on the horizon of the Soho family. So he pushed open the door with the weak rattle in its throat and stumbled down the 2 steps, got past the 2 ancient cashiers, and shouldered himself into the musty back closet where Mr. Lorry sat at great books ruled for figures, with perpendicular iron bars on his window, as if that were ruled for figures as well, and everything under the clouds were a sun. "Hullo!" said Mr. Stryver. "How do you do? I hope you are well." It was Stryver's grand peculiarity that he always seemed too big for any place or space. He was so much too big for Tellson's that old clerks in distant corners looked up with looks of resentment, as though he were pushing them against the wall. The house itself, magnificently reading the paper, quiet in that far-off perspective, seemed a lower displeased, as if Stryver's head had been butted into its waistcoat. The discreet Mr. Lorry said, in a sample tone of the voice that he would recommend under these circumstances, "How do you do, Mr. Stryver? How do you do, sir?" And he shook hands. There was a peculiarity in his manner of shaking hands, always to be seen in any clerk at Tellson's who shook hands with a customer when the house pervaded the air. He shook in a self-abnegating way, as one who shook for Tellson and Company. "Can I do anything for you, Mr. Stryver?" said Mr. Lorry, in his business character. "Why, no, thank you. This is a private visit to yourself, Mr. Lorry. I've come for a private word." "Oh, indeed," said Mr. Lorry, bending down his ear while his eye strayed to the house afar off. "I am going," said Mr. Stryver, leaning his arms confidently on the desk, whereupon, although it was a large double desk, there appeared to be not half a desk enough for him. "I am going to make an offer of myself in marriage to your agreeable little friend, Miss Manette." Oh, dear me, said Mr. Lorry, rubbing his chin and looking dubiously at his visitor. Oh, dear me, sir, said Mr. Stryver, pulling back. Oh, dear you, sir. What is your meaning, Mr. Lorry? My meaning, said the man of business, is of course friendly and appreciative, and that it does you the greatest credit, and in short, my meaning is everything that you could desire, but really, you know, Mr. Stryver. Mr. Lorry paused and shook his head at him in the oddest manner, as if he were being compelled against his will to add, you know, there really is so much to think of you. Well, said Mr. Stryver, slapping the desk with his hand, opening his eyes wide and taking a deep breath. If I understand you, Mr. Lorry, I'd be hanged. Mr. Lorry adjusted his little wig at both of his ears as a means towards that end, and bit the feather of a pen. Damn it all, sir, said Stryver. Am I not eligible? Oh, dear, yes. Yes, you are eligible, said Mr. Lorry. If you say eligible, you are eligible. Am I not prosperous? Oh, if you come to prosperous, you are prosperous. And am I not advancing? If you come to advancing, you know, said Mr. Lorry, delighted to be able to make another admission. No one can doubt that. Then what on earth is your meaning, Mr. Lorry? Said Mr. Stryver. Well, were you going there now? Said Mr. Lorry. Straight there, said Mr. Stryver, with a pump of his fist on the desk. Well, then I wouldn't, if I were you. Why? Said Stryver. Now I'll put you in a corner. He shook a finger at him. You are a man of business and bound to have a reason, so state your reasons. Why wouldn't you go? Because, said Mr. Lorry, I wouldn't go on such an object without having some cause to believe I would succeed. Damn me, this beats everything, said Stryver. Mr. Lorry glanced at the distant house and glanced up at the angry Mr. Stryver. Here's a man of business, a man of years, a man of experience in a bank, said Stryver, having summed up 3 leading reasons for complete success. He says there is no reason at all. Says it with his head still on. Mr. Stryver seemed to be remarking upon the peculiarity as if it would have been infinitely less remarkable if he had said it with his head off. Also, we have a picture of this grand confrontation. I hope I'm actually holding that right. There we go. I always knew I liked Mr. Lorry. When I speak of success, said Mr. Lorry, I speak of success with the young lady, and when I speak of causes and reasons to make success probable, I speak of causes and reasons that will tell as such with the young lady. The young lady, my good sir, said Mr. Lorry, mildly tapping Mr. Stryver's arm. The young lady, the young lady goes before all. Then you mean to tell me, Mr. Lorry, said Stryver, that it is your deliberate opinion that the young lady at present is a mincing fool? No, not exactly. I mean to tell you, Mr. Stryver, said Mr. Lorry as he turned red, that I will hear no disrespectful word of that young lady from any, and that if I knew any man, which I hope I do not, whose taste was so coarse and temper so overbearing that he could not restrain himself from speaking disrespectfully of the young lady at my desk, well, not even Telson should prevent my giving him a piece of my mind. The necessity of being angry in a quiet tone had put poor Mr. Stryver's blood vessels into a very dangerous state when it was his turn to be angry. Mr. Lorry's veins, though, methodical as their courses could usually be, were actually in no better state now that it was his turn. "That is what I mean to tell you, sir," said Mr. Lorry. "Pray let there be no mistake about it." Mr. Stryver sucked on the end of a ruler for a while, and then stood hitting a tune out on his teeth with it, which probably gave him a toothache. He broke the awkward silence by saying, "This is something new to me, Mr. Lorry. You deliberately advised me not to go to Soho and offer myself, Stryver of the King's Bench Bar." "Are you asking for advice, Mr. Stryver?" "Yes." "Very good. Then I will give it, and you have repeated it correctly." "Humph. And all I can say of it is," Stryver laughed, "ha! This beats everything, past, present, and to come." "Now, understand me," said Mr. Lorry. "As a man of business, I am not justified in saying anything about this matter, for as a man of business, I know nothing of it. But as an old fellow, who has carried Miss Manette in his arms, who is a trusted friend of Miss Manette and her father too, and who has great affection for them both, I have spoken. The confidence is not of my seeking, remember. Now, do you think I might not be right?" "Not I," said Stryver, with a whistle. "I can undertake to find third parties with common sense. I can only find it for myself. I suppose sense in certain quarters. You suppose mincing bread and butter nonsense. This is new to me, but you're right. I dare say." "What I suppose, Mr. Stryver, I claim to characterize for myself. And understand me, sir," said Mr. Lorry, quickly flushing in anger again. "I will not even at Tellson's, have it characterized for me by any gentleman." "I beg your pardon," said Stryver. "Thank you. Well, Mr. Stryver, I was about to say, it might be painful to you to find yourself mistaken. It might be painful to Dr. Manette to have the task of being explicit with you. It might be very painful to Miss Manette to have the task of being explicit with you as well. You know the terms upon which I have the honor and happiness to stand with the family. If you please, committing you in no way, representing you in no way, I will undertake to correct my advice by the exercise of a little new observation and judgment brought expressly to bear upon it. If you should then be dissatisfied with it, you can but test its soundness for yourself. If, on the other hand, you should be satisfied with it, and it should be what it now is, it may spare all of you. What do you say?" "How long would you keep me in town?" Oh, it is the question only of a few hours. I could go to Soho this evening and come to your chambers after." "Fine. Then I say yes. I won't go up there now. I am not so hot upon it as it comes to. Fine. I will expect you to look in on me tonight. Good evening." Then Mr. Stryver turned and burst out of the bank, causing such a concussion of air in his passage through it that to stand up against it, bowing behind the two counters, required the utmost remaining strength of those two ancient clerks. These venerable, feeble people were always seen by the public in the act of bowing, and were popularly believed, when they bowed a customer out, to keep on bowing in the empty office until they bowed another customer in. Mr. Stryver was keen enough to divine that the banker would not have gone so far in his expression of opinion on any less solid ground than a moral certainty. Unprepared as he was for the large pill that he had to swallow, he none the less got it down. "And now," said Mr. Stryver, shaking his finger at the Temple in general, "my way out of this is to put you all in the wrong." It was a bit of the art of an Old Bailey tactician in which he found great relief. "You will not put me in the wrong, young lady. I'll do that for you." Accordingly, when Mr. Lorry called that night, as late as 10 o'clock, Mr. Stryver, amongst a quantity of books and papers littered out for the purpose, seemed to have nothing less on his mind than the subject of the morning. He even showed surprise when he saw Mr. Lorry, and he was altogether in an absent-minded and preoccupied state. "Well," said that good-natured emissary, after a half an hour of bootless attempts to bring him around to the question, "I've been to Soho." "To Soho?" said Mr. Stryver. "Oh, to be sure, what was I thinking?" "I assure you, and I have no doubt," said Mr. Lorry, "that I was right in the conversation we had. My opinion has been confirmed, and I reiterate my advice to you." "I assure you," said Mr. Stryver, "that I am sorry for it on your account, and sorry for it on the poor father's account. I know this must always be a sore subject with the family, so let us say no more about it." "I don't understand you," said Mr. Lorry. "I dare not say," said Mr. Stryver, nodding his head in a soothing way. "No matter, no matter." "But it does matter," said Mr. Lorry. "Oh, no, it doesn't. I assure you it doesn't. Having supposed that there was sense when there is no sense, and a laudable ambition when there is not a laudable ambition, I am well out of my mistake and no harm done. Younger women have committed similar follies so often before, and have repented them in poverty and obscurity so often. In an unselfish aspect, I am sorry that the thing is dropped, because it would have been a good thing for others. In a worldly point of view, in a selfish aspect, I am glad the thing is dropped, because it would have been a bad thing for me in a worldly point of view. It is hardly necessary to say that I would have gained nothing by it. There is no harm done. I have not proposed to the young lady, and between us, I am by no means certain, upon reflection, that I ever should have committed myself to that extent. Mr. Lorry, you cannot control the mincing vanities and giddiness of empty-headed girls, and you must not expect to do so, or you will always be disappointed. Now, pray say no more about it. I tell you, I regret it on account of others, but I'm well satisfied on my own account. And I am really very much obliged to you for allowing me to sound you, and for giving me your advice. You know the young lady better than I. You are right. It would have been a terrible match." Mr. Lorry was so taken aback that he looked quite stupidly at Mr. Stryver, who was shouldering him towards the door with an appearance of showering generosity, forbearance, and goodwill upon his erring head. "Make the best of it, my dear sir, and say no more about it. Thank you again for allowing me to sound you out. Good night." And Mr. Lorry was out in the night before he even knew where he was, and Mr. Stryver was back lying on his sofa and winking at his ceiling. I feel like something very bad is going to come out of Mr. Stryver, the lawyer, being told no. But that is the end of the chapter. Wow. Yeah, I definitely think that they would have been better off with just a love triangle instead of this love quadrangle, because it feels like Mr. Stryver is one of those people who has very rarely heard the word no and does not really know how to deal with it. I wonder what he's going to try to bully Sidney Carton into doing, because he doesn't seem to have much, I was going to say much ambition. He has a lot of ambition. He just doesn't seem to have much drive to do anything for himself. And he has a good friend from school who he can force to do anything he wants. That was pretty good, though. Thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this double upload, double chapter night. And I will see you tomorrow. Be sure and hit the thumbs up on your way out, because it does always make me smile. I almost said it makes you smile. It might make you smile. You never know. But hit that thumbs up on the way out, and I will see you tomorrow.